Today's daf in one of the hardest prakim in Shas that we're continuing is daf Samach Vav in Masechah Bava Metzia 66, right? Am I right? I think I'm right. So the Mishnah yesterday on daf Samach Hayim Bet, this is obviously very, very, very complicated and important. The Mishnah said that if a person sells a field to somebody else and gives them part of the money, I sell you a field, Reuven sells a field to Shimon for $200. Shimon has $100 to pay. And he says, Reuven says to him, look, you'll give me the other $100 after 3 months, right? Or whatever time. The sale will be finished. And you acquire it retroactively. We talked about this yesterday, from now. So we had a big debate about who eats the payroll during those 3 months. Because if the seller eats the payroll, then it seems likely like he got 3 months worth of payroll for lending money, essentially, for letting him not pay him for 3 months, which looks like interest. If the buyer eats the payroll, then the problem is if he doesn't end up paying the other $100 to buy the field, he'll get his $100 back. And essentially he lent $100 to the seller. He got him back 3 months later, but he also ate payroll for 3 months. So he got interest. So we had a discussion about that. We had an opinion of Rabbi Yehuda who disagreed with our Mishnah, who said that's tzad echad beribit, right? There's a possibility of ribit, but if he pays, there's no ribit. So therefore, it's not ribit at all, even if the whole thing falls through. That's not, because ribit, according to Rabbi Yehuda, is only when you are guaranteed to have ribit. But if it's tzad echad, meaning it's a possibility but not guaranteed, it's not ribit. But according to the Chachamim, it was a problem. And the Mishnah says that's the Chachamim. You can't eat it. So we said, what do? You put it in escrow, right? You put the payroll away. And if the guy ends up buying the field, he can keep the payroll. If he doesn't, he loses the payroll. So that's how we resolved it. That was the first case in the Mishnah.
What if the payroll rots in the meantime?
No, you sell it. Yeah, that's what escrow. Escrow doesn't mean, sorry, you don't put the payroll in the bank. You have
not the bank, but you set it aside in the storehouse and it rots.
No, so you don't. You sell it. You sell the payroll and you keep the money. But you and obviously they take a cut, unfortunately, right? But you'd have to have some outside firm take care of these payroll and be the responsible party until you can resolve the issue. The second case in the Mishnah seemed to contradict the first case. The second case said, and that's what we're about to discuss more today, that if a person says to another person, I want to lend you money, I'll lend you $1,000. You got to pay me back in 3 years, right? That's your deadline to pay me back. If you don't pay me back in time, your field will be sold to me essentially with this $1,000. Now your field is worth $1 million, or say $10,000. I'll pick easier numbers. Meaning the field is worth much more than the amount I lent you. But so it turns out that I can lend you money and get back much more. Mishnah said that's not a problem. It's not a problem at all. And that's what they used to do. So ask the Gemara yesterday. That's, I think, what we're up to. He got the last 2 dots, I presume, right? So
or buy it.
Oh, so he didn't get to that part. Okay, so let me read that part then. So that I was about to explain that, but it's good. So let's read it inside. So machar lo bayit, machar lo sadeh, right? A person sells his house to someone, or he sells his field to someone. Marlo, and he says, oh, sorry, it's a different case. Let me go back to our Mishnah for a second. So our Mishnah, we said, is okay, and we're going to learn more about it today, about why, but the main reason is because it's a sale, right? So meaning, I'm lending you $1,000. If you don't pay me back within 3 years, then this $1,000 was actually not a loan, it was a purchase. And you can take your car to me that's worth $1,000 and say, I'll sell it to you for $50. That's not interest. That's a bad deal, right? But it's not interest. So that's not a problem. So collateral. I can sell, it's like collateral, but it's turning it into a sale. So the case that we said yesterday was from a Braita, which is what we're up to now, 10 lines on the bottom. Machar lo bayit, machar lo sadeh, right? Person sells his house to someone else. Again, Reuven is desperate for money. His kid's going to college, he's got to come up with a lot of money. So he goes to Shimon and says, I'll sell you my house for, it's worth $1 million, but I'll sell it to you for $50,000 because I need the money. But when I get the money back, I want to buy it back from you. Okay? So he makes a condition. Machar lo bayit, machar lo sadeh, va'amar lo, and he says to the person buying it, likishayia li ma'ot hichsirim li. When I have the money, I want to buy it back from you. That's asur, right? And we're going to see why in a second, but obviously because essentially you're going to you're lending, the guy's giving you $100,000 for your house, but you're going to buy it back from him. He gets to live in the house for 3 years without rent, and then you give him back the $100,000. So you gave him ribit, right? However, if you say the opposite, if the purchaser says, look, I know that you really don't want to sell this, you need, whatever, but when you get the money, don't worry, come back to me, I'll sell it back to you anytime. That's mutar, okay? So says the Gemara now, Mantana. Now, who is the Tana of this Braita? Amar Afuna, Braita of Yeshua, the low Rabbi Yehuda. This doesn't go like Rabbi Yehuda. Meaning the first part that we said was prohibited is not like Rabbi Yehuda. Because Rabbi Yehuda said, here Rabbi Yehuda, Amar Tzadachad Ribit Mutar. That if there's only a chance of Ribit, it's Mutar. Right? In this case, Reuven sold his house to Shimon. He said, on condition that if I get the money, I'll buy it back from you. If he doesn't get the money and doesn't buy it back, there's no interest, right? So there's not necessarily going to be ribit. If he does get the money and buy it back, it looks like ribit, or it is ribit, because it turns out the sale was really a loan, and he got paid back the loan and got to live in the house for 3 years for free. So that's the problem. It's only a problem with Rabbi Yehuda, right? So ask the Gemara now, 5 lines in the box.
Well, then why is that? Then why is it considered ribit? Unless you presuppose the value of the house changed one way or the other, right? But it doesn't have to.
The guy what? Sorry, the guy with what?
No, are you presupposing that the value of the house changed in the
No.
period?
No, the value didn't change. There's no.
Why would there be ribit? He's buying it back the same price that he bought. That
he lived in it for 3 years without paying rent, or if it was a field, he ate the fruits for 4 years, whatever. It doesn't matter what time.
But it's a sale.
But
he sold the house.
No, but it's not a sale. If you make a condition that if I get money, I could buy it back, that's essentially a loan. Because it wasn't a sale, it was on condition that I can buy it back. That's the definition essentially of a loan. It was a conditional loan, right? Meaning if I buy it back,
it's sale.
Well, it's a conditional sale. It's a definite sale, but there's a possibility that it'll end up being a loan if I get the money back. So ask the Gemara now, Maishna Reishna or Maishna Sefer. So why is it prohibited if the buyer says it, and it's permitted if the seller says it? Amar Rava, because Sefer Damali Midate. Because in the Seifa, basically the buyer, is saying, if I feel like it, meaning I don't have to sell it back to you. It's like a sob story. You're doing this, and he says to him, don't feel too bad about selling your treasured house because you got to raise money. I'll sell it back to you, but he doesn't have to do it. And since it's not a condition, it's midate. It's if I feel like it, then of course I later can do it and resell it to you, but I can buy something from you and resell it the next week. That's not rebit. The problem is only if it's a condition of the sale. So that's the explanation of Rav. Now, to clarify this, we're going to keep talking about this. Ahu Gavra, now we're 4 lines from the bottom. Ahu Gavra, dezaven le'ara l'chavre shelo b'achrayut. This is a case where a person sold property to his friend, his chaver, but without guarantee, without achrayut, right? Usually if you sell a field, meaning a field is something that's fixed, right? If Reuven sells a field to Shimon, right, and then 3 weeks later the bank shows up, or Levi shows up to Shimon's house and says, "You just bought this field from Reuven, but I got news for you. I got a contract that Reuven owes me money, and this field was Reuven, so this field goes to me." And so Shimon is now out of the field. So usually, what would happen is Shimon would then go back to Reuven and say, "I paid you money for the field. Levi took the field from me. You've got to come up with money for me to pay me back." That's achrayut. Right, and we have the opinion of Shmuel. Remember, we had earlier in this Masechta that achrayut is ta'ut sofer. That even if you don't write achrayut in a sale, it's assumed, right? But of course, you can specifically say, "I'm doing without achrayut," right? Which you would do, especially if you probably got a good price, right? You know that Reuven is a sketchy guy, right? You're basically buying his stuff on fire sale, hoping that all his creditors don't find you, right? So you're taking a risk. So you buy this field, shelo ba'achrayut. Now, when Shimon is buying the field from Reuven, right? That's the case I used. Shimon sees that Reuven is sad about Reuven sees that Shimon is depressed or sad about buying the field because he starts thinking, "Oh my gosh, why am I getting into business with this guy? He's a mess." So Amar Le, so Reuven says to Shimon, "Amayat Sivid, why are you so worried about what's going to happen here? If my creditors find you and they take the field from you, magbina lecha shufra shivcha uperi. I'll pay you back. Not only will I pay you back what you lost, that any investment you make in the field, any fruit you grow in the field, I'll pay you back everything. I'll make you whole. Okay. Now, this is what Reuven promises to
Shimon.
Shimon. Amar, so the question is that permitted, right? Because it sounds very prohibited, right? You're basically saying, I'm going to pay you back more because of you're taking this. So Amar Amemar says Amemar, don't worry about this. We're now at the top of Daf Samach Vav Amud Aleph. Says Amemar, move over a little bit. Amar Amemar Petumi Mili Ba'almahu. This has no effect. It's just Reuven trying to I don't know how you translate that in English, but sweeten the deal, right? Petumi literally means to fatten something up. But
seduce him, seduce.
Okay. So he's just talking, but Reuven really doesn't mean it. And of course, if Levi shows up and takes the field from Shimon, he has no recourse, right? So he can go to Reuven and say, but you told me you were going to do it. Some say even if you wrote it in a contract, you don't have any recourse. Okay. Now, of course, just to be clear, Shimon bought a field without conditions. It's like when you go to a store and you say, can you write in the contract that you guarantee the work? And the guy says to you, no, but if you have any problems, come back, I'll take care of you, right? So that's the same as saying, I'm never going to help you, right? Because if you really meant it, you would write in the contract. Tosis makes his whole point here, right? But that's what Reuven said. He said, I'll make it up to you, but he's not accountable to that. So Amar le Rav Ashi la Meimer. Now, Rav Ashi said to Amemar, what's the reason for this? Why is it that when Reuven says to Shimon, look, I know you're worried about buying the field. Don't worry, I'll make it up to you. Said Amemar, Reuven's words are not taken seriously. Why is the reason for that? Time am I? It seems to me, the Gemara is going to change this in a second, so don't get too excited, but it seems to me that kivan de lokeach bailat nuye. Right? Usually, if you buy a field, you make the conditions. You say, I'm buying it from you on condition that, et cetera, et cetera. But here, mocher kamatni, right here, when the seller sort of started throwing in, oh, don't worry, if they take it from you, I'll give you extra. Then, amr petumi mili ba'amu, right? Then it seems that, so this is what he was assuming. The reason that we don't take this claim seriously, this t'nai seriously, is because it's the seller. And it's not normal for the seller. Usually, if you're a buyer, you go and you say, okay, I'll buy your house on condition that if the plumbing breaks, you fix it, that if this happens. The fact that the seller is making these guarantees tells us that he doesn't really mean it. He's just trying to sweeten the deal, as we say, right? Not really sweeten the deal, but make the guy feel better. Says Rav Ashi, that seems to be the explanation. But now my problem is, what about the Braita that we just quoted? Elamatnita, right? Not the Braita, our Mishnah from yesterday. The Ketani were 5 lines from the top of Samach Vav. The Mishnah said, right? This is the Braita, right? If the seller says to the buyer, when you have the money to pay me back, right? I'm selling you a field for $1,000 or whatever. I'm sorry. You're buying my house from me for $1,000. I'm selling it to you, right? When you have the money, this is the seller saying, ma'ot achzir lecha, I will give it back to you, then it's mutar, right? So remember, we said earlier today that it depends on who makes the condition. If the seller makes the condition, then it's prohibited. If the buyer makes the condition, then it's permitted. Why is it? Why is now different from the buyer and the seller? It seems to be the opposite. It's because when the buyer makes the condition, you say, you shouldn't be the one making the conditions. The one selling it who makes the condition, right? That it's the seller who usually should be making the condition, meaning I'll sell it to you, and when I get money, I want you to sell it back to me. And here, mocher lo atni. Here, the mocher did not say that. It's the lokeach kamatni. The lokeach, the purchaser, is the one who made the condition. And we said earlier today, oh, ma'ishin reisha, ma'ishin seifa. Why is it that in the first case, where the seller makes the condition, it's ribit and it's prohibited, or it's prohibited because it might be ribit. And if the buyer makes the condition, it's okay. And we said, we're quoting what we said earlier. And Amar Rava, and Rava said, Seifa da Amar le mida'ate. The reason that the Seifa is permitted is because since the buyer basically made the condition, that's not serious, because it's not usually the buyer who makes the condition, right? And sorry,
Which one knows this?
I take it all back.
We just said it was the seller doesn't make the, but the buyer usually does.
No, so
that's what you said above, and
right.
when we were discussing that with with the sale with Reuven and Shimon, and you
So
said
it
it was the
depends on
buyer
what-
supposed to make the condition.
So it depends on what the condition is and who gains from the condition. Meaning the assumption is the person who gains from the condition is the one who makes the condition, right? So when I buy a field from you and I'm worried that the field's going to get stolen, if I'm the buyer, in that case, I make the condition. If I'm selling you my house and I want to buy it back from you because I really want it back, then I should be the one to make the condition, right? So then you would understand that in this case, since the purchaser is the one who doesn't really want to give back the house, he's very happy to buy your house for a good deal. He's not the one to be making the condition. The problem is that Rava said the reason that the condition doesn't hold is because it's mida'ate. It's because he basically said, if I feel like it, right? So the question is, why is it mida'ate, or is it because you shouldn't be the one making the condition? So is it, says the word, time mida'ate. The reason why it's permitted is because the buyer in this case says, if I feel like it, I'll sell it back to you, in which case it's not binding, but implying, lo amrle mida'ate, lo amrinan, petumi mili ba'amu. If the person did not say, if I feel like it, then you would say, oh, his condition's a real condition. But why is his condition a real condition if he's not the one who should normally be making the condition? Answers the Gemara, what we mean to say is not that he said to you, if I feel like it. It's nasa kimanda amali mida'ate itmar. What we mean is not where he said, I'll sell back to you if I feel like it. In fact, this is the point, that since the buyer really has nothing to gain by agreeing to this, we assume that when he says it, he's just trying to make the person feel better about what happened, but he's not legally committing to it. And the same would be true the opposite way, that if you're selling a field and there's nothing for you to gain by committing to doing all these things, then it also is not a binding condition, okay? But Tosfos points out, and this is what I said earlier, that it's a little complicated because what do you mean there's nothing to gain? You wouldn't buy the field from me unless I made this condition, right? So there's obviously a reason you're saying it, but he points out that you chose to buy this field without achrayut, right? Obviously, you could have said, I'm only buying your field if you guarantee it in writing. You specifically did not guarantee it in writing. And again, according to Shmuel, you have to write that you're guaranteeing it, you're not guaranteeing in writing. So clearly, if you didn't write it, but you relied on this verbal thing, you should recognize, and we recognize halachically, that it's not binding. Maybe if you have some moral responsibility, but it's not binding.
Space.
Now, continues the Gemara with the first two dots, on Samach Vav Amibet. Hahu Shriv Meira. There was a person who was very ill. Shriv Meira means someone who's dying, essentially, critically ill. The Katav Lagite L'Dabitu. He wrote a get for his wife. He was, he had a brother who was sailing the South Indian Seas, and he had no children. So if he died, his widow, if he died, would be beholden for Yibam or Chalitza, his brother, who was nowhere to be found. So he's about to go into this major surgery, right? Doctors say you have a 20% chance of surviving. So he writes a get to his wife, okay? But as he's handing this get to his wife, Ingid, he groans, itnach, and he sighs, because he's sad about this, right? He loves her. So Amra Leh, so his dear wife says to him in his hospital bed, Amai kamit nachmit. Why are you sad? Ikaimit didachana. Look, I'm truly yours. If you survive this operation, obviously they didn't talk about operations, but if you survive this illness, I'll be yours. Don't worry. You're divorcing me because I understand what's going to happen. I'm going to stick with you forever. Of course, and you know what happened, right? He woke up from surgery miraculously the next day, and she was already married to somebody else, right? So Amar Reb Zvid, right? So said Reb Zvid, well, what she said has no implication because she was just, petumi mili ba'almahu. She was just trying to make him feel better. She had no commitment to staying with him. He gave her a get. There were no conditions in the get, right? He didn't make a condition. This is a get if I die, which you could do, but there's complicated halachic stuff there, right? So he wrote her an unconditional get. Her words have no implication. She's just, it's an awkward thing when your husband is going into surgery about to die and he feels bad. You want to make him feel better, but it has no legal implication. So you can see it's similar. Says Ravachim Difti Ravina, what do you mean? She didn't mean it. Who cares if she meant it? She can't make a condition, right? What do you mean halachically? She couldn't say add a condition to the get, right? It's not in her hands to do that. Let's say she wasn't just being nice to him. it's in her, is it, this is bitmia, right? This is in astonishment. Is it in her hands to put a condition on the get? It's up to him. He could write a condition in the get. She can't write a condition in the get. Says the word, no, because Ma'adatema, you would have thought, that only because he had her assurance, he gave her the get, right? He's about to hand over this get. She sees that he doesn't want to do it. She says, don't worry, I'll stay with you, right? I'll remarry you, I guess, if you survive. And that's why he gave the get. You might have thought it, but Kamash Balan, that in fact, you might be, that's what he was thinking, but it's foolish. And it's not something you can rely on, because in reality, she's just saying it context-wise to make him feel better. She doesn't mean it. It's not legally binding, and they are divorced.
Or she meant it when she said it, but then later she changed her mind.
Well, it doesn't matter if she
That's
means
better
it.
deal.
Right. Haveo also.
But the divorce is a valid divorce.
The divorce is a valid divorce, and her commitment doesn't mean anything.
And her second marriage is valid,
And her second marriage is valid. Correct.
as long as it's not to a Kohen.
I was just thinking.
Haveo also. Now,
But what? So a general rule here seems to be that verbal promises are worth the paper they're not printed on.
well, so right. So it's a little more complex though, because it depends on the context, right? We're going to keep discussing this more today.
I
I'm not,
Kiddushin does.
because there's specific cases where it does, but it also depends on, again, on who's making the commitment and whether it's something that we think they wouldn't have had to make otherwise, right? You understand, like, is it something that was thought to be essential to the deal? So that seems to be part of the question, is based on context and who's making it. But let's continue.
But if he made the condition here, it wouldn't be a valid divorce, would it?
He could have, yes, he could have made a condition to her al tanai. You can make a condition on you can give a get al tanai. He can give her a get and say, I'm divorced if I die. It's a little complicated, because how do you define death? Obviously, this comes up, but then when is it 30 days? What if I died 2 years, right? So remember we had all these discussions in Gittin, like it has to be, there has to be a end point. You can't say if I die, everyone dies, right? So when does the get start? But he didn't do that in this case. This is a case where he wrote a get that just said, I divorce you, and he handed it to her. Now, if he had said when he handed it to her, this get is only on condition that such and such happens, that would be true, even if it's not written in the get.
Yeah.
Right? It's just the case here is that she made the condition, and we say that she, in the context, did not really mean it, and therefore we don't think it was really meant.
So therefore, she could not, if he made the condition here, she could not get married in the interim then, right?
Correct. If he made that condition when he gave her the get. Halveo asadeo. Now, the Mishnah had the case, right, where a person lent someone else money on his field, right? This was the second case in our Mishnah. And he said to him the following: I'm lending you $1,000. I don't think you're going to pay me back. I'm not so relying on you. So your field that you own on the corner of Johnson Avenue and whatever is guarantee for this loan. And if you don't pay me back in 3 years, I get your field. Now your field's worth $10,000, right? So I'm going to make I'm just picking, but that's the case. The case of the Mishnah is where the field is worth more than the loan. But that's okay. You're allowed to do that, right? Because it essentially becomes a sale. That's how I'm explaining it. We're going to see in the Gemara. If you don't end up paying back the money, it means that it wasn't a loan of $1,000. It was a sale of your field for $1,000. Okay.
And they both agree to the deal.
They both agree to the deal. Amar Rav Huna. Now Rav Huna says, 1 second. This is only bishat matan ma'ot kana. If at the time you make the deal and sell the field and give the $1,000, you say, if you don't pay me back within 3 years, I get the field. Then after 3 years, if you didn't pay back, you get the field. But kana hakol, you get the whole field. But if it's la'achar matan ma'ot, if you make the condition after the deal, meaning I lent you $1,000, and then a year later I say to you, look, I really need the money back. And you say, listen, give me 2 more years. And that was the condition. It's going to take me 2 more years. But if I don't pay you back, you can have my whole field. Then it doesn't work. Lo kana ela keneged me'otav. Then you only can get in the field the $100 that you, or 1,000, whatever number I picked, that you originally lent. You don't actually get the whole field. The field becomes a guarantee, but you get the portion, but you don't get the whole field. And again, that's what Rav Huna says. Rav Nachman says, no. Afilu la'achar matan ma'ot kana hakol. If you, even after the time of the deal, you can come back and say to him, if the borrower says to the lender, if I don't pay you back by the end of the loan, you can have the whole field, and he both agree to that, he gets the whole field, if he didn't pay him back. Now, Rav Nachman uvta gabe reish galuta kishmate. Rav Nachman, actually, there was a case that, remember, Rav Nachman was the Dayan in front of the Reish Galuta in Bavel, and Rav Nachman paskin the way he just said, that there was a case where Ruvain, lent money to Shimon, and Shimon said, if I don't pay you back within 3 years, you can, 6 months later, Shimon said to Ruvain, if I don't pay you back within 6 months, if I don't pay you back within 3 years, you can have my whole field. And Rav Nachman paskin that's the case, that Ruvain can get the whole field. Okay? Now, they brought this psak and they wrote a shtar. Now, it's not so clear what they wrote the shtar about, but maybe they wrote the shtar saying that Shimon agreed to this. Okay? And that therefore it's enforceable. They brought this in front of Rav Yehuda. Where am I? Kare Rav Yehuda l'shtari. Rav Yehuda ripped up the shtar. He said that this is bogus. You can't commit after the fact. Amar le Reish Galuta. So Reish Galuta said to Rav Nachman, you told me last week that I could collect his money, but Rav Yehuda kare l'shtarcha. Yehuda ripped up your shtar. What do you say to that? Amar le. So Rav Nachman said to the Reish Galuta, Dardiki kare. So Rashi, there's two languages here. One is dardika kare. Did a little child rip it up? Meaning, is he an insignificant person? Gavra Rabba kare, right? He's a great man, Rav Yehuda. He was a great person who tore it up. Chaza b'tayim Rav Kari. He must have found some detail that I didn't know about in the condition and what they said, and he tore it up. I'm not questioning his judgment, even though I disagree with the psak. Some say that in fact Rav Nachman said it, in a haughty way. Amarle dardike kare, right? Sorry, not a question. He's a dardike kare. He's like a little kid. I don't care what Rav Yehuda does. He's a fool, right? Because compared to me, they're all amateurs, right? So I don't really care that Rav Yehuda disagrees with me. I don't really respect or worry about his opinion. He's wrong, and I'm right. And in fact, this is still a good start. That's what Rav Nachman said. Now, a little bit later,
Halacha is usually according to Rav Nachman in monetary matters.
we always pass like Rav Nachman, correct?
Yeah.
Hadar Amar Rav Nachman, but Rav Nachman later said, you know what? I thought about this some more, and I actually think that the whole thing makes no sense. Afilu b'shat matan ma'ot lo kana v'lo klum. That even if at the time of the loan, of the original loan, Reuven gave $1,000 to Shimon, and Shimon said, or wrote down even, I'll pay you back within 3 years. And if I don't pay you back, you can take my whole field. That doesn't work. It doesn't work. Now, why not? We'll see in a second. But the main reason it doesn't work is that we assume that Shimon does not mean it because he thinks he's going to pay back the $1,000. He's just saying it so that Reuven gives him the money, but he doesn't really mean it. And whenever, we're going to see in a minute, if Nachman ends up concluding that whenever a person says, if I don't pay it back, I'm going to give you something, they never mean it. And it's never legally enforceable. Okay?
So what do you do instead?
You can, well, we'll see. Let's read. You'll see. Okay? Eitvei Rabba Rav Nachman. What about our Mishnah? Right?
Are you sure it's the borrower saying that and not the lender saying
It doesn't
that?
matter. It doesn't matter in this case who says it.
It really doesn't matter who says this?
In this case, it doesn't matter who says it. But let's keep going. Why are you doing?
Want one?
So let's keep reading. We're going to get to all these cases, but yes. Eitvei Rava Rav Nachman. Ask Rava to Rav Nachman, what about our Mishnah? Our Mishnah says the following. Im iyata noten li mikan vad shalosh shanim harehu shali, harehu shalo. Our Mishnah says explicitly, unlike what Rav Nachman just said, that you can make a condition. Remember, our Mishnah didn't actually talk about who made the condition, but it didn't talk about both sides. It did say that the lender, the one giving the field, right, the borrower, I guess, made the condition. If he said to him, sorry, the lender said the condition. But anyways, our Mishnah says that if you make a condition, the condition is enforceable. How could you, Rav Nachman, say the condition is never enforceable? So Amar Le, so Rav Nachman said, I agree, our Mishnah disagrees with me, but I don't care about our Mishnah. Because Ani Omer Asmachta Kanya, right? I used to think that an Asmachta means something that you give somebody else to rely on. That's somech, means to rely on. So an asmachta means a verbal assurance, right? So I say to you, actually not just verbal, it can be written, but let's say an assurance that I say to you, lend me the $1,000. I'm going to pay you back in 3 years. If I don't pay you back, you can take my whole field. That's a verbal assurance or insurance, let's just say. I used to think, says Rav Nachman, that that's binding. But then I heard that Minyumi said that asmachta lo kanya.
Who's that?
That Minyumi says asmachta lo kanya, and I think Minyumi's right. So I don't hold like our Mishnah anymore because I hold like Minyumi. Ask the one on the bottom line, but what about our Mishnah? Well, Minyumi kashya matnitin. I thank you that Minyumi says asmachta is never kona. But what about our Mishnah? So some say, well, could be a baitema. One possibility is that our Mishnah is Rabbi Yossi. Damar asmachta kanya. Rabbi Yossi is a different Tana. There's another case in Bava Batra where he says that asmachta is kona. But in fact, Rav Yossi is wrong according to the other Tanaim, and therefore our Mishnah is not the halacha. Our Mishnah is Rav Yossi, and I hold the smachta is not kona. And it says Rav Nachman, I was persuaded to come around to Minyumi's opinion. So that's one possibility. Ibaydema, if you turn the page to the top of Daf Samach Vavam Bet, which is where it gets a lot more complicated, is possible that in fact, although a smachta is not kona, if you just say it, you can say, I want it to work right now. The Amar Le Kini Me Achshav. So if you say, I am purchasing, I'm lending you $1,000, and if you don't pay me back $1,000, I will give you the whole field today, and then they make a kinyan, then in fact, that's not a smachta. Because since it happens today, not at some point in the future, there a smachta does work. So the whole case, asmachta doesn't work according to this ibayit ema, is if you say it for a time in the future. But if you say it's from now, then the asmachta works. Now, of course, the problem you're going to remember from the first part of the Mishnah is what happens for the next 3 years, right? Whose field is it? Because if the borrower gives back the money within the 3 years, then it was just a loan and it's his field, and the lender never got the field. So if the lender keeps the field and eats the payroll, then it's going to look like interest. But on the other hand, if the lender, right, if the borrower doesn't pay back the money, the lender gets the field, right? Then if the lender basically, if the borrower, right, then the problem is it will look like repeat the other way. So
no, that was part of the agreement. They agreed that from Merosh that after 3 years he could have the field. It was a done deal. It was part of the sort of the conditional sale, conditional loan, whatever it was. But so that's there shouldn't be any problem. Asmachta, no asmachta.
No.
That's part of their deal. Both of them agreed to that.
Right, but remember that's called agar natar. I gave you money. I gave you $1,000. At the end of 3 years, I get the field. But during that time, I got benefit from the fact that you hadn't paid back the money yet. So that appears to be, I gave you benefit from lending you the money, right? So,
It
but
helps it the other way.
But so Rashi explains here that would obviously be whatever we said in the ratio of the Mishnah. Either you hold like Rabbi Yehuda, that tzadechad b'ribit is mutar, in which case none of this is ribit, right? Because since if you could pay back the money, it's fine, it's not a problem. And then it would be fine for the lokea, I guess is the word, or the lender to keep it. Or you can say that they put the money in escrow, right? And you see what's going to happen, like we had earlier. So it's not necessarily anyone gets it during 3 years. But that's the answer. So sorry, I'm getting my names all confused. Rav Nachman holds, based on Minyumi, that asmachta is never kona, except we just came up with one exception. It might be if you say kini me'achshav, that asmachta would be kona. So now, top line of Daf Samach Vav Amud Bet. Amalei Mar Menuka Umar Kshisha. Now, Mar Yenuka, which means the younger son, Mr. Young One, and Mar Kashisha, which means Mr. Old One, right? These were siblings. They were Bnei Rav Chisda. They were the sons of Rav Chisda, and they said to Rav Ashi, Hachi Amar Naharda'ai Mishmei Rav Nachman. Got a lot of names here, right? Third line. Naharda'ah, who was a group or a person from Naharda'ah, whoever that was, said in the name of Rav Nachman the following, 4 lines from the top. Hi asmachta. When you have a asmachta, now again, asmachta means I buy something or I lend you something and I say, if I don't pay you back, I will give you my whole field. Bismane kanya. During the time that we think right now, bismani means during the time of when the time is up. So when 3 years are up and I come to you and say, give me back my money. And you say to me, I don't have the money, just take the field. Then it's kona. But below zmani, if it's not that time, if it's a year or two into the loan, then lo kani, then it's not koni. Amalei, so he said back to him, that doesn't make any sense. Kol midi b'zmani kani below zmani lo kani, right? Everything, every condition, everything doesn't take effect till the time that you agree on. What do you mean in 3 years? Dilma, what he meant to say, or what you heard and you didn't understand. Hachi kamrita. This is what we meant to say. Ashkeche begozmani. If, let's say, again, this is a 3-year loan, right? So Ruvain lends Shimon $1,000 for 3 years. And Shimon has a field that is meshubad to this loan. So if Ruvain finds Shimon begozmani, excuse me, now we understand this means during the time, not after 3 years, but during the 3 years. He says, oh yeah, I can't wait till you pay me back. And Shimon says, you know what? I'm going to pay you back. But if I don't, you can have my whole field. Then then he really means it. We're going to question this, don't worry. But there's, because I didn't have to say it.
Why would he say that?
Because there's no pressure on me to say it. The fact that there's no pressure on me to say it means that I really mean it. Because I already borrowed the money from you. You already gave it to me. My time is not up yet. There's no pressure on me. The fact that I said I'll give you the field means that I really mean it. But if it's butter's money, but if it's after the time, the 3 years are up, and Reuven comes to Shimon and says, remember that loan? And Shimon says, look, I'm getting the money together. Give me a few more days. And if I don't get it together, just take the whole field. V'amar kini, lo kani. Then he doesn't mean it. My taima, machmat kisufa hu. It's because he was embarrassed, because he's like, he doesn't have any money to pay him back. He feels terrible. So people say things to make themselves feel better. So therefore, we assume he doesn't really mean it. He said it under sort of duress. But says Mar Velohi, but this is wrong. Okay? Afilu begozmani nami lokani. Even if it's a year into the loan, and Shimon says, I've got your money, don't worry, I'll pay you back in time. And if I don't pay you back, take the whole field. It's not literal, and it's not legally binding. Right? Hi de kamarle kani. The reason he said that to him is because he says, look, I don't need this guy on my back. I don't need Reuven calling me every day. Right? He thinks, kasavar ki matis mane lo leiti l'tardan. I don't want him to come and knock down my door. So if he thinks that, oh, look, if I don't pay him back, he's going to get my whole field, he's not in such a rush to come collect from me. So I'm saying it I'm not planning on giving him the whole field. And therefore it's not binding, right? It's essentially an asmachta. But because I don't want him to bother me, I'm going to say it to him. So therefore we don't take it literally. Amar of Papa, now says Rav Papa, Haya smachta, and again, these are nuances of Rav Nachman. At the end of the day, we're going to say they're all wrong, but let's just keep going through them. Not all wrong. We don't pass like any of them. But says Rav Papa, my opinion about a smachta is zimnim kanya, zimnim lo kanya. Sometimes it's kona and sometimes it's not. Yosef, you have to be quiet. Zimnim kanya, zimnim lo kanya. Sometimes an asmachta works and sometimes it doesn't work. What does that mean? Let's say, says Rav, this is great, says Rav Papa, Ashkeche the kashati shichra. Let's say Reuven lends Shimon $1,000 for 3 years. At the end of 3 years, Reuven comes back to Shimon and says, I want you to pay me back my money. And Shimon says, look, I got your money for you, but you know what? Or maybe I don't have your money. Just take the whole field. That's fine. So sometimes that works and sometimes it doesn't work. What does it depend? Let's say Reuven finds Shimon and he's sitting in the bar drinking away, right? He's having a drink and he says to him, take it. Then Kani, then he really means it, right?
What?
Because I'm not making any effort to pay you back. I don't need to pay you back. I don't want this field anymore. Just keep the field, right? He's relaxed. But the Kamahapich Azuzi, if you find Shimon at the end of 3 years and he's searching for money, he's trying to do any deal, he's trying to raise funds, clearly he wants to get money to pay you back. He says to you, oh, just take the field. He's saying it to get rid of you, right? So then, Lokani, then it doesn't work. Amrle Ravachami Difti the Ravina. Well, how do you know that just because the guy's sitting in the bar drinking, it's because he really is happy for you to take his field? Maybe that's his way of coping with the fact that he doesn't have any money. He's drinking away the sorrow, right? He's drinking away his fear that you're going to take the field away from him, or that he doesn't have any money to pay back his loans. Or Inami, or maybe, of course, he deputized someone else to get money for him. Right? He's got someone else getting money or doing the deal for him. You can't prove from the fact that he's sitting and having a drink that he doesn't really care about this field and he's happy to give it to you. Ella, Amar Ravina, says Ravina, you know how I know whether a person really means it or not? Ikapid bidmi, right? Let's say this is a guy who's incredibly stingy. Kapid doesn't mean stingy, but it means exacting, right? You go to him and say, I want to buy your house from you. And he says, okay, it's this much money. And you offer him 5% less. And he says, no, I'm not selling it for a penny less. Or you want to buy a cow from him. And he's very makbid to sell it. Then you know this is a person who's really keeping track of his accounts. And when he says, take the field, he means it, right? But if he's someone who's trying to sell off his stuff at a discount, he's clearly trying to raise funds to pay you back. He's got a yard sale going on. He's selling all his original Bob Dylan CDs for half price. So clearly he's trying to raise money. And so therefore he doesn't mean it when he says keep the field. He wants to raise money to pay you back. So if he's very careful, then he doesn't seem to care. He's not trying to sell his stuff at a fire sale. He's very makbid. He's waiting for the best deal. So clearly he doesn't want to raise money. And therefore you're kona. How can you prove that at all? Maybe the reason he doesn't want to start selling his stuff at a discount is because once people hear that he needs money and he's selling everything off, they're going to they're going to lowball offer him the whole time. Right? Dilma, I don't want my land to become cheap. I don't want people to start thinking I'm desperate. Ella Amar of Papa, some take out the next lines, but if he's not willing to sell off his land for a good deal, then you're kona. Amar of Papa, no, says Rav Papa, even though the rabbi said that again, Reuven lends $1,000 to Shimon for 3 years. A year later, Shimon says to Reuven, if I don't pay you back by the end of the term, you can keep my field. That doesn't work. Asmachta lo kanya. Reuven cannot keep the field. But you know what he can do? He can take $1,000 from the field, right? Even though asmachta lo kanya, apotiki havi becomes a guarantor. I don't know how you translate apotiki, but a surety, the migba mina, that he can collect from the field.
That makes so much more sense.
Even though at the time of the loan, he didn't say that. But even though he later made that condition, you say he didn't really mean the condition that you can keep the field, but he meant that you can collect from the field.
But why didn't he just collect now in the moment of the transaction for $1,000 from the field?
You know what? Amalei Rafuna braid Rav Natan Rav Papa. Said Rav Papa, Rafuna braid Rav Papa, braid Rav Natan to Rav Papa.
So it says, wait, is this the condition is this a situation where the lender came in the middle of the deal? Because if they said this at the beginning,
It doesn't have
at
to
the
be
very beginning, at day one, then the field is his after 3 years, regardless. Well, what
No.
he says, I want it, I
No.
don't want it, I'm looking for money.
No, just to be clear, Rav Nachman said, Asmachta is never kona. Even if you made this condition on day one, it doesn't work because the person didn't mean it. Even if I said to you, I'm borrowing $1,000, this field, if I don't pay you back within 3 years, you can keep the field. You cannot keep the field.
But if the lender made that part of the condition, wouldn't it be valid then? The
No.
lender says to him, if you don't pay me back after 3 years, I'm going to keep your field. And the borrower agrees to that. Isn't that a done deal?
According to Rav Nachman, asmachta lo kanya, that it's not considered to be in a deal. A person does not mean it. Remember, we said on the top of the daf, the top of this amud, that if you say me'achshav, then it might work. If you make a condition that you sell it now, right? But if you don't do that and you just say, I'm lending you $1,000. If I don't pay you back after 3 years, you can keep this whole field. According to Rav Nachman,
No.
no matter who agrees.
No, that didn't make sense. I'm lending you, you can keep the field. Means if I'm lending you, I can keep the field.
Okay, fair enough. Then it does not work. You cannot keep the field. What Rav Papa is saying is that although it's true that the lender cannot keep the field, he can at least use the field to collect his loan, right?
Yeah.
So he can make the field. It's not putki. Said Rav Huna, Breder of Natan, the Rav Papa. That's why he didn't say that to him, right? Mi kamale kini the govaina. He didn't say you can own it in order to pay back, right? Sorry, mi kamale kini le govaina, right? Did he say you can collect it to pay back? So Amalei Mar Zutra Breder of Mari Ravina. Said Rav Zutra Breder of Mari Ravina. So what? Even if he had said that, it wouldn't have worked. V'amar le kini le migva mine kini. Right? Why would he say that? So asmachti, asmachta lo kanya. It's wrong. Just to be clear, in this case, this is a case where I don't know if names help or not, where the borrower, right, borrows $1,000. His intention is to pay back the $1,000. when he says, if I don't pay back, you can collect this whole field, he doesn't think he's not going to pay back. He thinks he's going to pay back. So his words have no effect, right? And therefore says this Gemara, again, we're going to keep going, don't stop at this point, that in fact, unless you say Kanime Achshav, the field is not part of the loan. Even if I said that you can have it, even if I said you can collect from this field, he did not intend to do that. He intended to pay back the $1,000, and therefore it's not effective.
But your condition is that it's 3 years. What you mentioned is 3 years. Now the lender comes to him after 3 years, say, I don't have the money. How long can this go on? 5 years, 6 years, 7 years? How long does the lender have to wait to get his money back if he cannot claim the field or something else that was collateral for this?
So
If the words are meaningless, then how long can he give him? Another 2 years, 3 years, 6 years?
right. So just to be clear, the field is, if you write in a star, the field is collateral, then we're gonna do the case in a second.
But you're saying if he can't take the field. So if not, and the borrower says, I don't have the money, how long does the lender have to give him? Another week, another month, another year, 10 years? He says, I'm searching for the money. I don't have it today, but I agree. I borrowed 1,000, but give me more time. How much time is he allowed to give him? How much time does he have?
So he has to pay him back right away, but he's not allowed to collect from his field. He can go to court, and the court would make some enforcement. They'll pass a judgment on him, and they'll make him do it. Eventually, he'll have to pay whenever court does that judgment. But the field does not become, unless you, again, in this case, you didn't lend the money with the field as an achrayut for the loan,
You
right?
just lent it as.
You lent the money, and you said, if I don't pay you back, I'm going to give you my field.
as its
right?
own.
So because you didn't write it down specifically at the field Zachari, let's read the next case, because we'll get to it in a second. Says the Gemara, Ela aputki to Amar of Papa Maihi, right? What is a case where, in fact, the field is aputki? That's the Amar Le. It's if he said to him at the time of the loan, Lo yehe lecha piraon elamizu. If you say at the time of the loan, look, I'm lending you $1,000, and I will pay you back from this field, then he clearly means to pay him back from the field. It's only where you said, and there it does work. So that's why I wanted to finish. But if you said to him, if I don't pay you back, I will give you this field, that's not, then he doesn't have to pay him back from the field, or he can't necessarily grab from the field. He owes him $1,000. He's got a deal. He goes to court. Court will figure out how they make him pay that $1,000. Ahu gavra, the zavale arle chavri b'achrayut. Now, these are, again, subsets of what we just discussed. Let's finish today's daf. There was a person who sold a field to his friend with achrayut, meaning he sold him a field. This is not a loan. This is a sale, right? He sold him a field, and he said to him, when he sold it to him, if one of my lenders, one of my creditors, I guess, comes and collects this field from you, I will give you a different field of mine to pay back, right? So Amrullah, he said to him the following, Itar filach minai, if they grab this field from you, if my people grab the field from you, magvitlimi idit diitlach. Says the buyer of the field, look, I'm buying this field from you. I think you're a sketchy guy. If they come and collect this field from me, I can come collect from you. And I wrote this in the contract that it was with achrayut, but I said verbally, I'm going to collect from your very best field, your A game field. Idit. Amar Lein, the seller says to him, no, I'm not giving you my very best fields. I need those fields, right? I'll give you the next level, idit, right? So there's let's do 4 levels. Idit is A, idit is B, Benonit is C, and Ziborit is D. I'll give you level B. I can't give you level A. So what happened in the end, L'sof tarfamine, they actually took the field away from the buyer. The buyer comes to the seller and says, I need a new field. But of course, the seller also had a tragedy. There was a flood, and his best field was now underwater. Okay? Ata Badka, a flood came, a typhoon came, Shakol idit, and it wiped away, it sunk, it covered the best fields. So now the seller doesn't own any A fields anymore. To suffer Papa Meimar, so what? He said, I'll give you the B fields, and so give him the B fields. Me'idit. Amarle, so he said back to him, Me'idit Amarle, he told him he would pay him back, pay him the best field, the B fields. V'akaiman, he has them. Well, that's not necessarily the case. Lemalei, the seller can say, I said I'll give you the B fields because I had A fields. Now my B fields are my best fields. I'm not giving you my best fields. So so he doesn't have to pay him back. At least that was his argument. Is that again, I made a condition. The condition was on the assumption that I would have better fields, and I'm not giving you my best thing. I got to earn a living. I'll give you my second best. But since my best is no longer my best, right? My second best is my best. I'll give you the next level.
They didn't specify the field though. They didn't say it's field on this plot, row 6, 7, 8. It's just saying so now his best field is really the second best field.
Correct. The contract in this case just said, I'm selling you this field. And there's achrayut. I have to pay you back with my other property, not which property. He verbally committed to a certain property, but like the whole discussion, we take that into context. Does everyone have 5 more minutes of brain power, or should we do this tomorrow? Tonight, okay. We are, I don't know, 15 lines from the top, from the bottom. Rav Bar Shva. Rav Bar Shva v'masik be Rav Kahana Zuzi. He lent Rav Kahana Zuzi, right? Lent him money. Amar Lane, he said to him, if I don't pay you back by April 1st, where are we now? May? If I don't pay you back by June 1st, then you can collect from this chamra, from this chamra's beer, right? The wine. Chamra's
Wine.
I think it's wine.
Wine.
Right?
Wine.
Thank you. Yeah, you can collect from this one. I don't know why I lost. It's late at night for me. So now the case here is a little more complicated because basically the question is, does the wine become his immediately? Let's say the wine goes up in value. Okay. So a week passes. He didn't pay him back. He said, lend him $100, 2 barrels of wine. Each one was worth $50. But then after a week, the wine has gone up and he wants to give him more. Or he wants to collect the wine. The borrower wants to give him something else. So Savar of Papa Lememar, when we say that this doesn't work, right? Because this is what we've been saying the whole time. It doesn't work. I owe you $100, but I don't have to give you the wine. That's Hanimili Ba'ara. That's only true about property, because property is really something people don't sell very lightly, right? The Lolas Muni kind of. You don't usually sell property. Avochamra, but wine, which is made to be sold, it's going to be sold all the time. It's like money. It's gazuzi dummy. It's like me saying, I'll pay you back money. This is just my equivalent to money. So he thought that this whole rule of Asmachta Lukanya doesn't apply. Amalei Rafuna, Breitav Yeshua, Rav Papa, that wrong. Hachi Amina Mishmei de Rabba, Kol Di'i Lokani. Whenever you say Di'i, meaning I borrow $100 from you, I'll pay you back after 3 years. And if I don't pay you back, I'll do X. Never. It never works.
You said that like 8 times.
You said it many times. That's the halacha. But
actually, isn't it the same thing when we have like in Kiddushin, when there's like conditions of like, I'll marry you after you get like, if you get converted, or I'll marry you if like the sky is blue, whatever. It's the same thing. It doesn't work either.
Well, sometimes it works. Depends on whether it's biyado to do it. So I just point out, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. And we're going to discuss this more, I think, tomorrow, because it's late and it's a complicated case. But Tosas makes the point here, and we'll see why this becomes very, very relevant in the next Gemara, that this, money and halachic things are very different, right? So conditions on a get, conditions on kiddushin, conditions on anything, on truma, on all that kind of stuff is not necessarily the same set of rules as monetary things, right? And so it's not always the case. Remember, we did say by kiddushin, if you recall, and I think that's what you're referring to, that there's times where we assume that what you're saying you don't really mean, right? You're just saying it because, if I'm a Kohen, remember we had all those cases, I'm a Levi, so there are times where it doesn't, times it doesn't, but the rules are not transferable from money to Isur. There's different rules. I'm gonna stop here because it is very complicated. We're gonna pick it up tomorrow. It's gonna continue the same discussion. We're not done with this, but the message for tonight is that in money, all these de's, all these if are not kona. Again, we said earlier that maybe you can make it work if you make a kinyan specifically, but if it's just verbal, all these guarantees are not taken literally. People just say them to make people feel better. No one assumes, if they're not written or if they're not written in a certain way, no one assumes that they are legally binding. We will continue tomorrow because that's not the end of the story. and see about cases where they are legally binding, and then, of course, get back to our Mishnah to understand what the case is in our
Does
Mishnah.
that seem to be the halacha according to Rab Nachman that asmachta is not kone?
That's the way we paskin. That's what we just kind of came out with. But again, whether you can change that with a kinyan, right, which we said earlier, you can, and what the situation is, how you would structure a star to make it not an asmachta, we'll keep discussing.
Uh-huh.
Okay. Tomorrow morning we're doing early. I hope everyone can make it 7:45 a.m. Be up there bright and early with your coffee, and I'll see you all tomorrow. And unfortunately for me, I'm going to be here next Shabbat, which I wasn't planning on it. But I was going to go to Israel and my flight was canceled. So
Oh, no.
I was going to
Not allowed then.
was on United. So yes, I wasn't
Ah.
shocked, to be honest. But I
Yeah.
didn't know that 3 months ago when I bought the trip. So Shavua Tov, everyone.
Shavua
I'll
Tov.
see you tomorrow morning.
Okay.